How come whenever a difficult game comes out, people automatically equate it to the Dark Souls of whatever genre it is? Like Cuphead is the Dark Souls of side scrollers, Crash Bandicoot is the Dark Souls of platformers. What is that? It just because it's difficult doesn't mean that it's some sort of like equivocal type of benchmark of what makes difficulty in something. Just because it's hard to play doesn't mean it's the type of game that will make you want to throw your controller and sell your console back to Satan where you got it from in the first place. Now, when it comes to making a game difficult, I feel like developers shy away sometimes and go too far at it at other times because back in the day, back on the PS1, as far as I can remember, games weren't always easy. They were difficult way back then. Spyro the Dragon was hard for me as a kid. Maybe I was just bad at games. And I'll admit, some of these games I am just bad at. But there's a level where you should be able to learn how to play the game that you're attempting to play, and it shouldn't just keep beating you in the head to the point where you don't even want to try to learn it anymore. And I'll get into that later. But games were never easy back in the day. They were always, presented with a level of difficulty, and it was just what made the game fun to play, at least back then it was. Saying a game is like Dark Souls because it's difficult doesn't really mean all that much to me because I actually enjoy the challenge of Dark Souls because it is a challenge and not just obnoxiously difficult like the PS4 exclusive. When it comes to difficulty in a game, I'm going to focus primarily on combat in video games because challenge in video games when it comes to fighting should always give you some sort of tangible reward for making progress in it. It should be difficult, but it should have an effect of having a Twinkie dangling in front of you while you're running on a treadmill. You'll never catch it, but you can always see it. And the harder you work at it, the more you'll feel like you'll actually end up getting there. Like, a pretty difficult segment in a game that's not overly difficult in my opinion, Uncharted 2, the ending boss fight with Lazarevich, it's interesting because there's no health bar for you or him, and the only indicator that you're making progress is a little cutscene that you get every time you shoot one of the resin deposits. That's really important because even though you don't immediately know what you're supposed to do, once you figure it out, you instantly know it's effective. And while it doesn't stay easy all the time because come on, it's progressing. It's supposed to get more difficult. But that reward is always there. You never quite know how many of these you have to do, but you know that if you keep doing it, you'll get there. Crash Bandicoot was interesting because in the original game, it wasn't quite as liberal with the checkpoints as it was in the Insane Trilogy, which I just played back last year. I used to stream it. Man, times have changed. But the thing about it was, every time you got a new checkpoint, you either got it because you were making it through the level, or because the level was proving so difficult, the game decided to take pity on you. Either way, you did still feel rewarded. You're like, oh, good. I don't have to go all the way back to the beginning. Stormy Ascent. And in games like Cuphead, when you're doing a boss fight, the multiple phases actually kind of play with the psychology of the player because once the boss that you're shooting at transforms into something else, you know you've made progress. You don't know how much progress you made, but you know things have changed and you feel a little bit better. You feel an interesting mix of what is happening to me and also, hey, I'm getting there. I'm actually doing something. I'm making stuff happen. And it also helps that when you do ultimately die, your 13th or 14th time, it shows a progress bar that tells you exactly how far from the beginning to the end of the fight you made it. And that's really important because you're hitting your head against this wall, but the wall is budging and you can feel it and you can see it. Then you have a game like Neo, which gives you the controls and it gives you certain combat situations, but the combat situations it gives you in the training montages is only a 1v1 situation at a time because that's what the game is based around. One-on-one combat. It does not come equipped with the ability to fight a multitude of enemies. So imagine my surprise when within the first couple of hours of gameplay, I found myself with this immovable wall of a multitude of enemies, a group of 6 enemies standing next to each other. I tried for actual multiple hours to lure one away from the group to fight them that way. It never worked. They all came after me at the same time, and the game was not engineered for you to be able to fight that many people at once. Maybe later in the game you'll get good enough to do it, but I'm not making any progress. I'm not gaining any skill. I'm trying different techniques, but none of them are working. The game did not give me the information required to solve this problem. The game's responsible for giving you the tools necessary for progressing in it. The challenge comes from how able you are to put those skills to use, not how able you are to come up with how the game is supposed to be played, because it failed to give you sufficient information when it was teaching you how to play it. And I'll readily admit, I'm not good at Neo. I'm terrible at it. I didn't have fun playing it. Another game I'm bad at, Bloodborne. Bloodborne was engineered similarly to Dark Souls, but it rewards you being aggressive. But you do still have to find a balance between offense and defense. That game's not so difficult that it's not fun, but I'm just so bad at it that I wasn't having fun, so I stopped playing it. But it's still a well done challenge. The Souls games are extraordinarily good at having difficulty in the game. Another thing that you're going to have to get right when it comes to difficulty is it still fun? And a lot of that does have to do with a tangible reward, but sometimes you'll be playing a game that you're finding extraordinarily difficult, but you're just having a blast playing it. Maybe it's because the music is good, maybe it's because the game is really well stylized and is cute to watch. Like Crash Bandicoot, as a kid I didn't realize that game was frustrating past all belief. I was just having a great time. There's games, even when you put a certain game on the hardest difficulty, it's still really fun just because of one element or another. When it comes to making anything, all parts, all elements of it have to work harmoniously. If something's off, it's gonna stick out. If it comes to the programming or the game design, that's gonna be the most obvious thing in the world. Let's talk about God of War 2018 for just a hot second. I played that game on the Give Me a Challenge difficulty, because I usually play it on the hardest difficulty there is, so that I can get all the trophies for beating the campaign, but that wasn't an option because you have to beat the story first. And I was like, okay, it doesn't really matter, it's just playing the game on a harder difficulty. That should only affect how much damage I can sustain before I die, and how much damage that the enemies can sustain before they die. Things like that, how much health I have, how hard resources are to come by, things that are workable. I didn't count on the camera sitting like right here on Kratos' body, so I could never really see what's going on. And sure, there's the ring that lets you know that something's coming near you, but it's drawing your attention away from what's on screen, what's right in front of you, and keeping your eyes locked on the enemy that you're fighting is important, because this is, again, not a game designed for fighting multiple enemies at once. It's a lot like Neo. The old God of War games was just a hack and slash, but this is a one-on-one emotional story. That's exactly what they were going for, an emotional story. But the only emotion I really feel from this is rage. It's such an annoying thing that I can never see what's happening around me, so I end up getting hit by 15 straight fireballs, and then I'm just dead now. And does that come from me being somewhat bad at the game? Sure, I was still learning, but by hour 10 of hitting my head against this wall, I should be able to come up with a combat system that works, and I did. I had it down, but then there's enemies that are only susceptible to certain types of damage, and that gets really annoying, because it's all... They wanted to go for this effect of having to switch up the way that you fight mid-battle to keep you engaged, but it didn't keep me engaged, it kept me angry. I was having such a hard time adapting to what I was seeing on screen, because I'm also not the hugest collector, which is funny because my gamer tag is completionist, but I don't collect absolutely everything in the game because I'm not that kind of gamer. So when the game becomes actively more and more difficult because you're not collecting things, that's poor design. What should happen is the game becomes easier because you are collecting things, but failing to collect everything in the game should not have an impact on how able to play the game you are. Sure, I didn't get all the health apples, but that shouldn't mean that I just suddenly can't do anything. I shouldn't be able to not function at this point because I just failed to grab a couple of health apples. It's really obnoxious. The game pats itself so hard on the back for being different. Different isn't always good. The combat system in that game does not allow you to take notice of everything in your environment. Sometimes you'll die and be like, what just happened to me? Sometimes you'll die and be like, I didn't, be like, of course. No, I wouldn't put it past this game. Difficulty in games is essential to keep the player engaged, but it's very important that you strike a balance between difficult but fun and difficult but nerve-wracking. Games going forward are going to have a hard time striking that balance more and more. We're going to see that as time goes on, but I'm really hoping that sometime between the PS4 and the PS5, PlayStation exclusives get more playability. I don't want them to just become easier. I just want them to be more playable. That's all I'm really asking for. But as always, this has been Talk to Touch Productions, just kind of talking about some stuff. And if you like what you've seen here, leave a like down below. Comment what you want to see me talk about in the future. I haven't asked you to do that in a while. Subscribe here if you're new, and thanks for sharing this video around with all your lovely friends. And that's pretty much it. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time, but according to YouTube analytics, you guys only watch for a minute and a half anyway, so I'm pretty sure you're fine. Later.